It's been a while since I've worked on my Russian Napoleonic army, and I'm glad to get back into it with this excellent set of Ulans from Perry Miniatures. These were generally great miniatures, but they did have problems with gaps, especially right around the horse's head right here, which can be easily solved with some sprue glue, which I will show you how to make in the upper right hand corner. First, I Zenithal prime all the models, which is basically a black primer followed by a white primer afterwards. For the white priming step, I apply it at a 45-degree angle all the way around the models to give it a 3D shadow-like effect. Generally, the tops of the models will be a lot wider and brighter, and the bottom and recesses are gonna be in shadow. To give the raised surfaces and edges a much sharper highlight, I'm going to be dry brushing matte white onto these models. I basically rub off most of it on a piece of towel paper, and then with the brush still somewhat loaded with white, I'm going to go ahead and just dry brush it onto all these models. This will make it very nice, crisp, and bright on the upper surfaces and especially along the leading edges of all the models. Compared to the models on the right, you can see that the models on the left with the dry brushing are much more defined. For the horses, I have a very simple technique where I use only 4 Army Painter speed paints. Here, starting with Grim Black, I painted all over the horse that I want to look like a black horse. The only areas that I avoid are basically the mane and the tail. Otherwise, all the brittles and the horses in general are going to be painted completely black. I do this for about 2 to 3 horses. I next switch to Sand Golem Speed Paint, and this is going to give me a light brown horse. Again, I apply it all over the horse. I don't really try to miss the brittles. I just paint right over them. The only areas again that I leave not painted are the mane and tail. Then after that, I switch to Darkwood Speed Paint, and this gives me dark brown horses. And again, I try to do it for about 2 to 3 horses per color. The last color that I put down is Gravefloor Gray Speed Paint. This can be fairly concentrated, so what I do is I usually put some speed paint medium on it. About 1 to 2 drops will do. This reduces the opacity of the paint a little bit, and then when you apply it on, it actually looks a lot grayer. Also, a pro tip, if you want white horses, just leave it white. You don't have to paint it, it's already prime white. For the next step, the 4 speed paint colors that you've already laid down, you're going to be using contrasting colors on the horses. For instance, on this white horse, I painted with some Sand Golem to give it a light brown mane and tail, and then I move on to other horses and painted other colors. For instance, dark wood on some. Of course, you always want the tail and the mane to match on the horse, but otherwise, there's endless variety that you can make just out of these 4 colors and randomizing them from horse to horse. For the brittles on the horses, you're going to be using Grim Black Speed Paint that I had used before on the black horses, and then you would just carefully trace them onto all the 3D brittles on the horses. There's going to be some on the snout of the horse, and then some along the body, at the bottom, along the sides, and also on the tail over here. Another pro tip, if you had painted any of your horses black, you do not have to paint the brittles. They're already black. For the hoofs of all the horses, you're going to be using leather brown acrylic fanatic paint and basically painting all of the hoofs for all of the horses regardless of their colors with this brown, leather brown color. Some of the hoofs are connected to the ground. You'll want to paint those sections brown too. Onward to the riders, I first apply Peachy Flesh speed paint onto all the faces. I saturate these areas with the speed paint to give it enough pigmentation and also enough shadow and depth. For my uniforms, I picked the Lithuanian regiment, which basically had gray pants, blue shirts, and crimson trimming. The banner on top of all the lances are white and blue, which you can find in the handout that came with this kit, right here. I start with Broadsword Silver Speed Paint, which is a metallic paint, and I apply it onto all the spearheads. I also apply it onto the scabbards of the swords, and then for the commander, I paint the blade of his sword with the silver as well. Don't forget the pommels of all the spears, those also get a silver treatment. For the shafts of the spears or lances, you'll be using hardened leather speed paint. Just go ahead and lay it down on all the wooden areas. I next go back to Gray Floor Gray, which I had used on the horses, and I'm going to be applying this onto the pants of all the riders. Because the pants are a darker gray, I do not use speed paint medium this time. I just apply it right out of the bottle onto the pants. For the musician's trumpet, I'm going to use Talos Bronze metallic speed paint and just apply it onto all the areas that look like part of his trumpet. For some of the red areas of the uniform, I'm going to be using blood red speed paint, like over here on the center section of the tunic, which is called a pennon. I apply this red onto this area, and I also apply it onto the cuffs of the arms right here on the left and on the right. I next switch to High Lord Blue speed paint. This is a nice rich dark blue, and this is going to go on all the saddle cloths, front and back, and also onto the majority of the tunics on all the riders. When applying this color onto the tunics, be careful to avoid the epaulettes on the shoulders or any of the cross straps. The collars of the riders also get blue. Now, if you do overshoot in any of these areas and you get them on the straps, epaulettes, or anything else, don't worry about it. There is a touch-up step later to fix those mistakes. The caps of the riders also get blue, the brim and the lower portion of the cap get blue, and then the very top surface of these shapka caps also get blue. For the bedrolls and pouches on the horses, you're going to be using Gray Floor Gray and Hardened Leather speed paint. The gray is going to go onto all the long bedrolls just behind the riders, and then for the more circular pouches, those are going to be getting the Hardened Leather speed paint. Next, I go back to Grim Black speed paint, and this is going to go in several areas. The first is going to be the cartridge pouches, which are behind the right hip of each rider, right here. The shoes and the stirrups also get this Grim Black speed paint. For the hair and mustache on all the riders, I use existing paints already on my wet palette, like Dark Wood, Sand Golem, or Grim Black. All those work really well for hair color. Just make sure that the mustache and the hair of each of the riders matches front to back, but otherwise feel free to randomize between rider to rider. For the rest of the crimson trimmings, I'm going to be using pure red acrylic Fanatic paints, and I'm going to be using a medium detailing brush. First, I'm going to be applying it onto all the saddle cloths, basically the trimming all the way around. I just repeat this process on all of the horses. I next apply this red onto all the stripes going down the pant legs on all the rider models. I also use this red on the top brim of all the shapka caps. Additionally, there was a vertical red stripe that went down the front and the rear of each shapka cap. Continue painting this red acrylic paint on all the sashes around the waist of each rider. Finally, the red goes on these triangular surfaces over here on the turnbacks of each of the tunics. The next step is the white touch-up, which you'll be using matte white acrylic paint on, and this is a fairly important step, so take your time. Areas I had overshot with speed paint, like these cross straps, get a nice 1 or 2 coats of white, and then also any of the gloves. You want to make sure that you accentuate the white on those so it looks nice and bright. And you have the braids, and also the shapka caps on the Lithuania regiment are white on the top. So make sure to put this white color on those areas to make it look really nice and bright. Also, the 2 straps that connect to the sabers need to be nice and white as well. You'll want your whites to look very brilliant and your lines to be nice and sharp. The next color is Greedy Gold Acrylic Metallic Paint. This is going to go on all the chin scales of the shapka caps, left and right. Go ahead and do this on all the riders. This gold also goes on all the buttons at the front of the vest. To make the leader model look more distinctive, I painted the hilt of his sword with some gold as well. Onward to the final steps, I'm going to be using dark tone wash from Army Painter, and I'm going to be painting anything that was not a speed paint with this wash, namely all the white areas. As you can see here, as the wash is laid down on the white, The shadows and the depth of it truly pops and it makes the white look really good. The only caution I have is the wider areas such as the cross straps. Run your brush over these areas just to make them look a little bit brighter and not coffee stained. Now let's put some eyes on the riders. Use a very fine detailing brush and white acrylic paint and then just dab it into the eyeballs of each of the riders. A technique that I like to use for eyes is black acrylic paint and the sharp tip of a toothpick to apply the pupils. Dab the toothpick into the black paint and then just dot the pupils onto the eyes. Just make sure that both eyes are looking in the same direction and it will look very convincing on these models. For the horses, it's basically the same process. You'll want to apply the whites onto the eyeballs, but then also the horses have very large eyes, which afterwards you can just go back with black paint and apply larger pupils onto the horses. Using the detailing brush instead of a toothpick. You really don't need toothpicks for horses. The same thing as before, make sure that both eyes are looking in the general same direction and your horses will be all done. Next, let's stick on the banners on all the lances. I chose the Lithuanian regiment, which uses these banners right here. I cut them out with a scissors and then just kind of carefully work my way through them, cut out each one individually. I only need 10 of these. The leader and the musician don't need banners. For the alignment of these banners, the white always wants to face the tip of the spear and then the blue faces the rider. So you want to fold these banners in half and apply some white or Elmer's glue on the one side and fold it around the top of the lance right by the blade. While this is drying, you can actually apply some crinkling to it to make it look like it's fluttering in the wind. Continue this process for all the lances. If you have Uhlans that have lances pointing down, you'll do the same thing, except when you crinkle it, you want to crinkle the banners so it's facing rearward, just like this. Basing the models can be very simple. Just apply Elmer's or white glue all over the base and then apply a flocking of your liking. For instance, this green grass, I apply it all over the base after I put glue on it and it should stick in place. And then after that, you're basically done. Protect your artwork with 1 or 2 coats of matte clear varnish. Here are the completed Napoleonic Russian Uhlans. These are painted as the Lithuanian regiment with blue tunics, gray pants, crimson trimming, and white braids, epaulettes, and plumes. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope you'll follow along as I have a lot more Napoleonic content coming up.